Question of the name of Deputy Brendan.
Thank you, Cathaoirligh. Minister, it's almost a year ago since you made a welcome announcement in relation to an extension of the DESH programme. That has been very welcome. The provision of those targeted supports in more schools will benefit a huge amount of students. I think something in excess of 240,000 students are now able to avail of DESH supports, and something like more than 1,200 schools are involved in that scheme. As you know, we all had schools that were disappointed that they didn't get included in the extension, and I sincerely hope that it will be possible to extend that very, very important programme further. You did excellent work last year in extending it, but more good work could be done with a further extension of a very important and worthwhile scheme that benefits the most disadvantaged students. Thank you, Cathaoirligh.
Thank you very much, Deputy, and I do want to acknowledge your particular interest in the DESH scheme, and I want to acknowledge as well that the Department does provide a wide range of supports to all schools, and that's including the DESH schools and the non-DESH schools, to support the inclusion of all students and address barriers to students achieving their potential. Supplementing the universal supports available to all schools, the Delivery Equality of Opportunity in Schools, or the DESH programme, is a key policy initiative of the Department to address concentrated, and this is the key, concentrated educational disadvantage at school level in a targeted and equitable way across the primary and post-primary sector. In March last year, as you've referenced, I announced a major expansion of the DESH programme, which means that for the first time since 2017, the programme was significantly expanded to an additional 322 schools. The programme now includes over 1,200 schools and supports approximately 240,000 students. This means, in fact, that 1 in 4 of all of our students benefit from the DESH programme supports. This recent expansion will add an additional 32 million to my department's expenditure on the DESH programme for 23, bringing the overall Department of Education allocation to the programme to €180 million. I'm very conscious of the benefits of the DESH programme. Analysis has shown that since the programme began in 2006, it has helped to close the gap in achievement between schools serving the highest levels of educational disadvantage and those serving populations with little or no disadvantage. It has provided children who come to education at a disadvantage with an equitable opportunity to achieve their potential in education. The extension of the DESH programme to new schools is just one component, however, of work in my vision for an inclusive education system which supports all learners to achieve their potential. Whilst the DESH programme supports those schools with the highest levels of concentrated educational disadvantage, I also recognise that there are students at risk of educational disadvantage in all schools. Since June of 2020 and over the past 3 budgets, I've secured funding to provide measures to support children in this regard. As part of Budget 23, and we've referenced it earlier, I announced over €50 million to provide school books. I've reduced the pupil-teacher ratio, and it will be at its lowest level of 23:1, and that's been a consequence of a reduction over each of the budgets of which I've presided.
Thank you, Cathaoirligh. I thank the Minister for replying. Minister, I very much welcome also your provision of additional funding towards additional services provided universally to all students, regardless of what particular school they attend. Minister, I discussed 2 particular schools with you in Cavan previously that were excluded this time, and I have detailed notes prepared, and I might talk to you later today on those particular schools. Minister, it's hard for any of us to explain in a centre where there are a number of primary schools, for example. I think of one town where there are 3 primary schools, a boys, girls and a Church of Ireland school. Now, children from the same family are maybe going to 2 different schools. One of the schools is in the DESH programme, the other school isn't. It's very hard to explain to that parent why her daughter is availing of the additional DESH support in her school, whereas her son is not able to avail of the same additional education provision in his school. And also that applies in a town where there may be a school under the patronage of a minority church. I have some instances now of children may be transferred or new entrants not going to the school that they would have traditionally gone to because of the extra attraction of the other school being in the DESH programme. So I think we need to take into account there where there are a number of schools in the one centre and all of them are not in the DESH programme. Thank you, Cathaoirligh.
Thank you very much, Deputy. I do want to be clear, and I did reference that the key issue here is concentrated levels of disadvantage. I absolutely accept that in every school there will always be children at risk of educational disadvantage, and I appreciate that. The specific supports from a DESH point of view refer to where there are concentrated levels of disadvantage. And to be fair, I absolutely accept the point that you've raised in terms of within a community one school receives it and the other does not. But unless you have the exact same students students attending both schools, coming from the exact same backgrounds, you do not have the same levels of concentration. And that is the point. I'm not for 1 minute suggesting that there aren't students at risk of education disadvantage in both of the schools in the area that you refer to, but it's the level of concentration that determines the DESH status. I do want to say as well, though, that following the National Census 22 held on the 3rd of April last, it is envisaged that the updated HP deprivation index will be generated by Pobble, and that will be available in Q3 of 23, and the Department will engage with Pobble in relation to this process, and the updated HP index will help us inform in terms of the variety of different, perhaps, layers of support that we might be able to offer to schools going forward.
Mr. Deputy.
Thank you, Caoimhe. Thank the Minister again. Minister, you may recall that a year ago or more I raised with the Taoiseach at the time, Micheál Martin, and yourself, the whole area of special education provision, and I compliment yourself and Minister Madigan on the progress that has been made in ensuring that a substantial expansion in special education provision. At that time, I questioned if the input from the local inspector, from the local Tigara, was factored into planning. Back years ago, the views of the local inspector who covered a county or half a county, whatever, that was critical in determining future planning, be it in the area of provision, both accommodation and level of teaching support for schools as well. Is the role of inspector critical in the assessment for the DESH programme? Because look, we can have algorithms and we can have census this and census that. There's nothing to beat up-to-date local knowledge in relation to what the needs of that local school community are. And I would be a firm believer in ensuring that the knowledge of the local inspector is factored into all decision making by the department. Thank you, Caoimhe.
Very much, Deputy. I just want to reference in the first instance the question of the education disadvantage, if I could just complete that. I'm very conscious of the need to ensure that there are supports across all schools, because across all schools we have children at risk of education disadvantage, and it is for that reason, as we've referenced earlier, we've had a variety of different measures in terms of the pupil-teacher ratio, the introduction of the free books at a cost of over €50 million, the counselling services which will be piloted in our primary schools, and all of that. But as a consequence of the new HP index which will be formulated, the next phase of work now begins within my department to ensure that we will perhaps look at a range of, I suppose, of a variety of different types of supports, not necessarily DESH, but types of supports that can be rolled out to schools in terms of, that will actually meet the needs of the schools, so that there will be almost like a step in terms of DESH, the next step and the next step. Specifically in terms of the point you raised around special education, you would be aware that the role here is the role of the CNO, considerable, the special needs organiser, considerable additional resources have been made available to the NCSE in terms of boosting the work of the NCSE and the availability of CNOs on the ground to communicate with parents, so that the fullest picture in terms of the needs of the student are obtained by the CNO and filtered back to the NCSE.
Thanks, Minister.